This happened my senior year of college over a year ago. I lived in a college neighborhood, surrounded by other kids that went to my school, with the exception of a family or two. We knew our neighbors well and everyone was fairly civil with one another. We did keep in mind though that this was a college area, and some sketchy things could happen. I think it was May when the first break-in happened. I woke up one morning to some text in my group message telling me that my next door neighbor's house had been broken into. They had multiple things stolen. A backpack with a laptop and textbooks inside, a gaming console, etc. They had notified the police and they were on the case. This obviously set my roommates and I into a little bit of a panic because we were a house of 4 girls, and none of us being wildly brave by any means. We decided the best that we could do was to make sure our doors were locked at all times, whether we were home or not. And so that's what we did. Flash forward to a couple of days later. My roommate Maggie and I were the only 2 home out of the 4 who lived in our house. We stayed up late watching movies as we always did, and then I headed off to my room to go to bed, while Maggie stayed on the couch. We were, I'm not pleased to admit, the worst at turning off the lights and saving electricity. So this night, the light in the kitchen, living room, and hallway were all on. Sorry, I know, we got better about turning lights off eventually. I slept soundly through the night, and woke up as the sun shone through the cracks in my blinds the next morning. As usual, after I woke up, I spent about 10 minutes in bed on my phone before getting up to use the bathroom. On my way back into my bedroom, I noticed that my blinds were tapping slightly against my window frame, suggesting that there was a breeze. My fan was off and my window was closed, so there should be no movement, right? Well, right, if my window had been closed. When I drew open my blinds, I was absolutely horrified to see that my bedroom window had been completely open all night. Or at least since after I had gone to sleep. I knew that my window was shut when I went to sleep the night before, and there is something wildly unsettling about the fact that my bed is also pushed up on the wall right against my window. So perfectly in fact that I used to sit in my window on my bed, with my feet able to touch the grass below. That's how low the window is, and that's how close my bed is. Now at this point, I was frantic. I ran out into the living room to see if Maggie was okay and if she had noticed anything or heard anything throughout the night. She wasn't home and I assumed she had gone to class. I texted her immediately explaining what had happened and asking her all of my questions. She responded lightning fast. She had woken up this morning in the living room, and when she walked into her bedroom to get ready for class, her window was open. Her desk, which sits right in front of her window, was pushed away from the wall, and her closet doors, which were always open because they jutted right up against the carpet, so they were pretty hard to open and close. They were closed. She said it looked exactly as though someone had pushed her desk away from the window to give themselves more room to enter quietly. In an absolute frenzy, I texted my other roommates, who hadn't been home, and my group message alerting them of what had happened. I crawled the house to see if any of my things were missing, and when my roommates came home later that day, they did the same thing. Nothing had been stolen, not even my laptop or my phone, which were both charging on my bed, right in front of the window. Not even Maggie's Apple Watch that was sitting on her desk in front of her window. We did call the police and they came to file the report, but they never followed up with us about it. I asked if they could dust my window for prints, as there had to have been handprints because the only way to open my window from the outside is to press your palms directly on the glass and push upward with significant force. But they never followed through with doing that either. I'm not sure really what to think of this, as maybe it was a planned break-in, but they didn't think I would be asleep in their point of entry. But they entered, we think, through another window nonetheless. So why didn't they take anything? And how did the sounds not wake us up? I was directly next to my window, so they would have had to jump over my body to enter my room. So I don't think they did enter from there at least, which is a little relieving. Maybe they didn't enter at all because the lights were all on, and they realized that people were home. But our cars were in the driveway, and it did seem as though they had entered because Maggie's closet doors were shut. This was bizarre to me. I'm just relieved that I've since moved out of that house. I'm pretty annoyed that the police didn't take it very seriously, but at least I'm also a little relieved that the people who broke in and I never had to meet. This happened a few years ago, in my old one-person flat. I had a strange feeling that something wasn't right for a few days. Like I was sure that food in the fridge was less than I had put back the last time. I found pillows from my couch on the floor and stuff like that. I lived alone back then, so there wasn't anyone else with access to my flat. Or so I thought. Well, one night I woke up at around 1 in the morning, sweating, and even though I didn't remember, I was sure that I had woken up from a nightmare. Since I was drenched in sweat, I decided to take a shower. So I put my phone up in the bathroom for music, turned on the water, and enjoyed my shower. A few minutes in, I heard the door move. I never closed it, but it still never moves. I took a look at the shower curtain and saw a shadow against it. And a look at my phone confirmed someone was there, since I could clearly see a reflection on my screen that showed someone standing next to the shower curtain. It took me a lot not to scream and to keep acting like I didn't notice anything, while silently taking the shower head off the holding and turning the water all the way to hot. I'm still kind of impressed with that quick thinking. Our water got really hot when you cranked it all the way to hot, and a few seconds later, steam was rising and the water hurt my feet flowing to the drain. I turned around, ripped the shower curtain open, and held the shower head right at the person behind. It was a woman, and she screamed in pain. I whacked her in the face with the shower head and jumped out of the shower and ran to the door, taking the key out of the lock and locking it close behind me. A little later, she started banging on the door, but the door didn't give. Thank God. I called the cops and I went to the kitchen to get my big kitchen knife just for safety. I felt like my throat was closing up when I saw it missing, and realized there's only one place where it could possibly be right now. The police came and arrested the woman, who turned out to be the former person living in the flat and was evicted after not paying rent. It seems she had made a copy of the key and came into the flat when I was at work, and sometimes at night. It's possible that what woke me up in the first place was her, and honestly, I don't even want to think about it. Ever since then, I always insist that the locks are changed when I move into a new place. Hi everyone, I'm finally going to tell you all about what happened to me 4 years ago. At that time, I was 17, and I was living for a few years in a small house with my mom after my parents divorced 6 years ago. The house wasn't huge, but we had 1 floor with our bedrooms and a small garden. We also have a dog who isn't really scary. It's one of those small dogs with a lot of hair. His biggest default is that he barks a lot during the daytime every time someone is closed from the garden. That annoyed me and my neighbors a lot. It's important to notice that my dog never barks at night, and always sleeps with me in my bed. Anyway, one night in the middle of the night, I had a dream where I heard a constant dog barking. In my dream, I felt like it lasted 1,000 years, but I think it only lasted for a few seconds. When I woke up out of that nightmare, I didn't feel the weight of my dog on my feet. I felt like something was wrong and then realized my dog was actually barking and growling. I didn't understand what was happening. I just looked for my dog and saw him on the top of the stairs, his head turned towards the front door. The door opening the garage was actually on the side of the front door. I jumped out of bed and I rushed to the top of the stairs where my dog was. There is the shadow of a man standing just at the bottom of the stairs next to the front door. I wasn't even able to shout. I just took my dog in my arms by reflex and ran towards my mom's room. My mom was just waking up at this point. She takes medication to sleep, so it's very hard to wake her up. Thank God, the door to her bedroom could be locked with a key. Even though I was shaking like hell, I locked the door. My mom then understood what was happening when we heard footsteps coming from the stairs. We froze in the corner of her bedroom and she grabbed her phone to call the police. While we were trying to reach the cops, the guy started shaking the door handle and then punching the door. After a moment he stopped, and the psycho laughed. And that's when my mom had the good idea of shouting, "I called the police, get out." After a moment, we heard him going down the stairs, still laughing. We didn't dare to move until we heard the police officers. When they arrived, no one was there. In the kitchen, on the table, there was a note where he wrote, "See you soon." That's how I translated it because the original note was in French. They said later that apparently the guy got in and out by my garage, which has a back door that at the time we always left opened. Immediately after that, we went to living with my grandparents for a while and moved out into a new house a couple months later. We never heard from this guy again, but we always check every door to make sure that it's locked before going to bed, and I've had trouble sleeping ever since. For almost a year after that, I waited until it was 4 a.m. to go to sleep, just to be sure he didn't find us and try to sneak into our home again. To give you a little background, I have a nervous tic where I laugh at the most awkward and inappropriate moments. I've always said that I would probably laugh even if someone is causing me physical harm. And now to the actual story. My family and I owned a small business in a not-so-great part of town. One day, I was just eating my sandwich and watching The Young and the Restless as I did every day with a coworker. Also, we were the only two there at the time. I looked up and I saw a figure peering through our display window, but I assumed they were just checking out the awesome display my mom put up there, because sometimes people only came to see what creative display she had come up with for that season. They suddenly opened the door and shut it, and I thought that was odd, so I stand up to see what's going on. And that's where I see a tall figure with a full-face bandana mask on, with only eyes and a mouth cut out. He comes through the door and demands us to give him the money. Naturally, I freak out, but I've always been told to just give them what they want and don't protest it, which is what I'd planned on doing. The next thing I know, my coworker stands up and says, "Run," as she is running towards the back. So I was like, okay, and I ran too. I went through the back door assuming she was right behind me, and I get all the way to the back of the driveway and I turn around to see that she's not there, so then I start panicking like, where is she? I'm just standing there like a dummy because I honestly don't even know what to do at this point, and I'm still trying to process what the heck just happened. I started walking down to the bank on the road beside us to tell them to call the cops since I left my cell phone inside. And then I hear a deep-voiced man say, "Take me to the money," in a hateful tone. I turn around and there's a man pointing a gun at me, so I just say okay, while freaking out obviously, and I go with him. I then start laughing like some kind of crazy person and he gets agitated. He then yells at me to walk faster with the gun pointed at my back, so I tell him that I'm sorry, which why the hell should I be? So I give him the whole $50 that we had in our register, and he takes me to the back and tells me to stand there and count to 20. So I do what he says, and then I yell for my coworker trying to figure out where the heck she went. Like, did they have her or what? No worries though, she was safe hiding in the bathroom. The cops never found who did it, but they didn't actually seem too concerned since he only got $50. Never mind the fact that someone had to go through a traumatic experience. Also, a side note, I had posted on Facebook that I would probably say I'm sorry to someone even if they were trying to rob me 2 days before this happened. Luckily, this was a while ago, and I have less anxiety about it than I used to. Although, all these people wearing these bandana masks due to COVID put me on edge lately. So did the robber who held a gun on me for $50. Let's not meet again. First off, I'm not the greatest at telling stories, so please bear with me. I'm not sure if this belongs here since it wasn't exactly creepy, but extremely scary. When I was 14, I met a guy named James. He was 17. I dated him for 5 years. I'm 30 now. I grew up very poor to a teenage mother. I never met my father until I was 20. I made some pretty bad choices as a young lady. James was a big-time drug dealer, and at the time I found that thrilling and so cool. It was a typical abusive relationship. He cheated on me a lot, would physically, mentally, and emotionally abuse me. He would then buy me things or gave me money to make it all better. Unfortunately at the time, I didn't know any better or had a poor self-esteem. His money took me away from my poor home life, so I stayed for 5 years. This happened when I was 17. James and his brother Victor bought a house in a really nice neighborhood. Victor was a single guy, the player type. He had a random girl over visiting that night. James and I were going to bed. It was about midnight. Victor and his new girl left the house and took James' vehicle. James and I were alone in the house. About 2 minutes after Victor left, we heard a knock at the door. James gets up and says, "Oh, he must have forgotten his keys." I'm in bed and I hear James say, "You have the wrong house. Sorry, buddy." He comes running into the room, telling me to close the door. As we hear the door getting kicked down, 2 men enter the house. One was wearing a bandana over his face. The other guy I didn't recognize. He wasn't trying to hide his identity. They started kicking down the bedroom door as we did our best to hold our weight against it. We were screaming and begging them to leave. At one point, the bandana guy got his arm and leg through the door. I made eye contact with him. He dropped his sawed-off shotgun. I reached for it and he seemed to back off a little bit. The other guy grabbed the gun. Out of fear, I couldn't recognize him, but I felt something in the stare that he gave me. We thought they were after drugs and money. We had no weapons. The money and drugs were in a separate bedroom. They didn't take anything. It wasn't a robbery. They were there to give someone a beating. James was on the phone with the police the whole time this was happening. The guys took off. It was time to check what they took and hide the drugs. The police came, and we noticed a bullet hole in the wall in the bedroom, directly beside the room that we were in. I found out later it was caused by the bandana guy hitting the gun out of the other guy's hand as he tried to shoot me through the door. I went home the next day completely traumatized, not wanting to tell my family about anything that had happened. They all gossip. I walked in the door and my grandmother knew about the home invasion. My family knew James was a drug dealer and they weren't concerned. I thought at the time someone who James knew must have known someone in my family, since she had a female cousin tell her. My cousin, Anthony's wife, called me saying, "Anthony wants to say he's sorry, but you weren't supposed to be there." Again, I was dumb and assumed someone in the thug world had told them. We lived in a small city. I was so naive and was convinced it was a robbery from a rival drug dealer. That wasn't the case at all. We spent weeks waiting for them to come back, and James made sure he always had a few scary guys with guns in the house. I realize now that this only added to the trauma. A few months after this happens, I'm at James' house reading the newspaper. I see my cousin Anthony and another guy in the most wanted section. The other guy looked vaguely familiar. Anthony is gang-related. We're the same age and grew up extremely close. Although we got locked up at age 13, and had been on and off ever since, Anthony and I would write to each other. We had a strong bond. The phone rings and it's a girl named Cindy that is completely in love with Victor, but since he's a player, he treats her like crap. She brings up the mugshots in the paper and says, "That's your cousin, right?" She confesses to me that the home invasion was because of her. The other guy in the mugshot liked her. My cousin Anthony was his friend. They made her tell them where Victor lived, and they watched the house until they saw what they thought was me and James leaving. She was apologizing profusely, begging me not to tell James. I didn't. I knew if I told him, he would have her shot also because it was my cousin. I assumed I would get some blame or have to show James thugs where my cousin lived. Regardless of what he did, I'm stupidly loyal to my family. I saw Anthony at a family function a few years later. He said that he was sorry and that he loves me, and that it wasn't his fault. That was 13 years ago. My life is completely different now. I am an upstanding member of society, but I still feel a lump in my throat when I talk about it.